This is Hops and Spirits Bar Conversations. Come for the craft beer, bourbon, whiskey, and great drinks. Stay for the conversations. Here's your host, Jonathan Green.
For those who are going back to school or taking their kids back to school, and that means summer's officially over, I hope you have a strong drink in front of you, no matter what that drink of choice is. Hope everyone's having a great week, a great day, a great month and year. We're getting closer also to one of my favorite times of the year, Whiskey Weeks, as we celebrate that in September as part of National Bourbon Heritage Month where we do everything at Hops and Spirits, or at least almost everything, with a side of whiskey or with a whiskey focus. That includes this show, our Hops and Spirits Kentucky podcast, our Cocktail 30s, pretty much just about everything that we can do. We'll focus mainly on whiskey, but that doesn't mean everything will. Of course, as there's plenty to do in the Hops and Spirits world. We got a great episode for you this week. We talk with Fergal from the Wee Banjo 3 group. They're Americana Irish band. They're amazing. And for tasting notes, we continue our Cocktails 101 with Jake Solik as we talk about the Manhattan. That's up next. Enjoy.
It's almost time. Where did I put those? Here they are. It's time for tasting notes.
We're back again with another tasting notes, and joining us once more is Jake Solik, the beverage director partner with the Professors LLC. Jake, good to have you as always.
Thanks, Jonathan. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. I'm having so much fun here talking cocktails with you this month. Cocktails 101. We did basics, then the sour recipe, the old fashioned. Those are two drinks that I just love. But now we're probably getting into some stuff that I may not have as often, but can be just as good. And I think next up is the Manhattan. So what do we got here?
Yeah, so the Manhattan is another fun one, and it's a good time if you haven't listened to the segment on the old fashioned, is maybe to go back and revisit that, because the Manhattan cocktail actually starts its life probably as something like an old fashioned. So vermouth in America didn't become a product that bartenders started using a lot until the 1860s. And it was still kind of new. It was this fashionable new fortified wine. People really didn't know what to do about it. So the first thing they started doing was making old fashions with vermouth. So we don't know who made the first Manhattan cocktail, but we know that along the line somebody was probably making a vermouth cocktail, and they said, you know what, this is just, it's not very strong. What it needs is a little bit of whiskey. And so some enterprising bartender, probably late at night after he got off, made the world's first Manhattan. We don't know why it's called the Manhattan. It could be named after the Manhattan Club. No one really knows for sure. But we know that the earliest Manhattans were very vermouth forward. And it's only until the probably late 1880s, 1890s that we start getting something that's a little bit closer to today's Manhattan. Like the old-fashioned, it's super simple, really easy to put together, and it's got a lot of flexibility.
And when you say, it's kind of like an old-fashioned and so forth, what are we dealing with here? Is it kind of the same basic three principles as the first two recipes we learned, or do we go a little further?
It is. You got the same sort of principles. You're going to start with 2 dashes of bitters. Instead of a 1/4 ounce of simple syrup, the way we use the Manhattan is we're going to put in 1 ounce of vermouth. And that's kind of like a separate conversation to kind of understand what vermouth is. But all wine has some level of residual sweetness in it. So the vermouth is going to act as our sweetener. And then we're going to put in 2 ounces of whiskey. So it looks like it's a little bit more sugar forward, but one of the beauties of vermouth as a modifier in mixed drinks is that vermouth, because it's a wine, also has a little bit of bitterness. It also has a little bit of acidity. And so it kind of, as a mixing ingredient, it's not as sweet as using something like raw sugar or sugar syrup, and it allows the whole cocktail to kind of balance itself out. The early recipes would have been equal parts. So you would have put in 2 dashes of bitters and then an equal portion of both vermouth and whiskey. Today, we tend to go 2-to-1 in ratio. That's kind of like the modern version. But if you're at home, I really encourage you to try putting 2 dashes of bitters and then equal parts whiskey and vermouth. It's an absolutely delicious cocktail.
Well, and that's how you can go back and forth, find your sweet spot on a drink. And is this one too where you can do? Does it have to be shaken? Can it be stirred? How does that work on something like this?
always going to stir a Manhattan. In fact, it's a red flag for me if I'm out at a place and I would order a Manhattan and the bartender starts to shake it. I'd either stop them or politely order a beer or a glass of wine. You only ever shake something if it's got milk or cream, eggs, or fresh citrus juice. Anything else, you really need to be stirring it, and it's not going to cause a Manhattan to go bad. It's not going to be prepared incorrectly. But shaking it's going to introduce oxygen. It's going to introduce bubbles. And so when you strain it after shaking it, you'll notice that your Manhattan is really muddy, ugly brown. And if you try sipping it, you're going to actually taste the bubbles. It's going to add a really weird texture to it. If you were to let that glass sit, after about 5 minutes, it'll actually turn transparent again as the oxygen rises to the surface and leaves. But of course, that means your ice cold drink has been sitting alone for 5 minutes getting warmer, and so you always just want to stir old fashions and Manhattans.
And when we're talking about stirring a drink, how does that work? I mean, are we just doing like one quick stir, or is it a little bit more to get everything mixed together?
You really want to get an ideal chilling temperature on it, and it's more scientific, I think, than most people believe. There was an excellent book that won the James Beard Award, I think back in 2014, called Liquid Intelligence by Dave Arnold. He does a whole chapter on this where if you're using ice to chill a cocktail, all of the laws of thermodynamics apply, which means if you want to chill something using ice, then you have to dilute it. So dilution and chilling are really two sides of the same coin. So you can't over-dilute something by chilling it unless you bring the whole vessel up to room temperature. What that means is all you have to do is take your mixing glass in front of you, add your ingredients. I always start with the smallest ingredients first and build my way up. Fill the vessel 2/3 with ice, and then stir until you reach max the lowest temperature that vessel is going to get. And that takes between 30 and 40 seconds. Starting out, really early in my career, 20 years ago, I would just slow count at home. If you do that enough times, it's like anything. It's, the 10,000 hour rule. You do something often enough, you get really good at it. And after you've stirred enough drinks, you can actually tell by touching the tin, because the tin itself will get so cold that you almost can't hold it. And you know as soon as you've gotten to that point that it's between 30 and 40 seconds, and you know that you're at maximum dilution. You can't actually, because of thermodynamics, you can't actually get it any colder at that point. It's reached a level of equalness between the temperature. The liquid and the ice are actually the same temperature, so it can't change at that point. And so you're done.
I love that. Just sometimes simple touch and feel can go a long way. And like the other ones, how can you kind of maybe play around a little bit with this? And can you mix in some different liquors and so forth?
Absolutely. The category of vermouth is huge. It's part of an even larger category called fortified wines that all are made according to the same general principle. So they have similar amounts of sugar, bitterness, and acidity. And so you can substitute those almost at will with either other fortified wines or Amari, or you can actually change the bitters, the vermouth, and the spirit. And this is how bartenders created the world's first dry martini. It's actually just a Manhattan that's all of the ingredients have been swapped for something else.
I love how everything goes back to something so simple. And Jake, I appreciate this as always.
All right, thanks.
Remember to check out Hops and Spirits on social media at Hops Spirits, all one word, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find Hops and Spirits on YouTube and at hopspirits.com.
Joining us here on the Bar Conversations, he's a quarter of the group We Banjo 3. We'll have him explain that name and how it works with two sets of brothers. But please welcome in Fergal Scahill.
Yeah,
Cahill?
Thank you. Yeah, Scahill. Yeah, you got it. Very close. I'll give you 4.5 out of 5.
For those that don't know and that'll see this and listen to it, I said it better, I think, the first 2 times we recorded, but life didn't like me and technology didn't like me.
No, you're doing fine, yeah. But like we've got some clinkers of efforts at the name Scahill, Shale or Fergo is the favorite one that I get written on my coffee cup, you know. But no, you did well, so thanks. Good to be here.
Well, I appreciate it. And for those that don't know, while you're on tour doing a few dates here in America right now, you guys are technically based in Ireland. So I decided to go there for my drink tonight, Little Row & Co. blended Irish whiskey out of Dublin, right next to the Guinness plant there. But I know you're not a drinker. I think in one of our recordings, you poetically said you had possibly used up all your drinks a little earlier on in life. So.
Yeah, a friend of mine likes to say that he thinks each person has a finite number of drinks in their lifetime, and I drank all of mine by the time I was 25. So yeah, I suppose when I started taking the music more seriously and making a career of it, then the drink and of course with Irish music, they're very closely linked. This association with having the pints and the sessions, and it just all blends. But it's hard then to have that as your job. And I found since I've stopped, it's made touring easier. It's made the gigging better, and I haven't missed as many flights.
A little cheaper too, I'm sure.
Just a bit, yeah.
So now, do you drink some non-alcoholic drinks? Because I know Europe's way ahead of that than we are.
Yeah.
Here in America, we're getting a little bit caught up. But I mean, do you have some of those non-alcoholic beers and so forth?
Yeah, there's loads of great stuff. Like I remember there's a great, as you say, coming from Europe. Germany has got a huge selection and always had years and years ago. Fantastic selection. So I do quite like. There's some nice German non-alcoholic beers that I get in Ireland. Or Guinness has made a 0.0, which I actually had. They've come to America with that now, which is actually a very good pint. It tastes and looks and has the feel of a pint of Guinness. So but out here then as the non-alcoholic, those little fizzy fancy waters that you can't pronounce. Yeah, they're very good.
Well, I was gonna say my other thing that I probably need to cut back on greatly is Coke Zero. That I tend to use that. I don't like coffee. I'm not a big coffee guy, so if I need a caffeine boost, that's my go-to. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not these days.
I am a big fan of coffee, and some of the cold brew in a can, or even there's so many great coffee shops now that are doing interesting things with nitro and with different really, really good coffee. So that's nice to see, and we really enjoy each town we go to, because as you said, we're on tour out here at the minute. I'm in Milwaukee right now, getting ready for Milwaukee Irish Fest this weekend. But every town we go to, we'll have our coffee shop that we like to go to, and we enjoy finding new places and that sort of thing. So
well, and I was gonna say, nowadays I feel like there's a new coffee shop just about every block, which is a good thing, because like you said, they're doing some cool things and a lot of fun there. Now, on the music side, I think you have a lot of fun, because is there a string instrument that you can't play? Because when I was looking it up, I mean, I think your list was like 5-6 deep of the instruments you played, along with percussion. But a lot of
a lot of string instruments. Yeah, I suppose when you look at, like, I'm a violinist or a fiddler primarily, so I've been playing fiddle since I was a kid, since I was 5 or 6 years of age. But the basis of the fiddle and the left-hand fingering of the fiddle is the same on a lot of instruments across. So mandolin, bouzouki, similar for viola. It's just, so when you play one string instrument, or for me anyway, I find that I can then transfer what I know onto different instruments quite easily. So my main instruments that I would gig working at are fiddle and guitar, and as you said, percussion, bower on the Irish drum. But I can generally throw my hand to any string instrument, and I once won a bet. I'm going to try and remember the name of the instrument now. I think it's called a balakma. So it was a tiny little Greek instrument, and some guy produced one at a session. He said, "I bet you $50 or whatever that you can't play a tune on this." And I was like, "Give it to me."
Challenge accepted, and I'm guessing you were able to?
I was able to, yeah.
I like that. Now I gotta ask though, I mean, your brother, I believe, plays the banjo. A lot of folks in the group played the banjo. Now I think it's not as many as it once was. But did you just not like the banjo? Did you just want to be different?
I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, and we're all musicians. So like every one of us have played. So I suppose we tried to play different instruments maybe growing up. I just like the fiddle, so that's why I started on that quite young, and I stuck with it, and I always enjoyed playing it. It's not that I don't like the banjo. I wouldn't say that I love the banjo. No, but it's the banjo. You know, you have to make fun of it.
I like it. I like it. Well, and like you said, you played the fiddle I think all your life. You've won all Ireland titles on it, the guitar, the some drums. You got group national titles in that. I mean, is that just second nature for you and the family to just be good at this, or is there just what's in the water over there?
I suppose I suppose a lot. It's like this brings up the question of nature versus nurture, and you know, for as long as I can remember, there was just a lot of work put into music. There was a lot of value placed on music within our house. From a very young age, I started playing. You mentioned the bodhrán is the Irish drum, and that roughly translates to the deaf man's drum or the deafening drum. Bauer is the Gaelic word for deaf. So the bodhrán, I started playing that when I was like 2 or 3 years old, and there was just always a love and an interest and an excitement around music, and I think that came from my parents. While they didn't play, they just loved music, and you know, there was always music in the house, and it was I don't think it was ever considered that it would be our career at that stage. You know, it was always go to university and get a degree to fall back on, which I didn't do. But
but I think it turned out okay. I think
that was the messaging. You know, it was get your degree and you can have the music then as a hobby. But it turned out that I did the music and have all the other things as hobbies. You know, so yeah.
Well, and I'll get to those hobbies in a second, but you also with some of the fiddle, I think I read too, where you kind of have a history, you know the history, you know the traditions, the different traditions across with the instrument, and you kind of bring all those together and put your own spin and kind of be a little bit innovative with it as well. I mean,
yeah, I think as I grew up playing traditional music, I also studied classical violin for 10 or 15 years maybe. And I then found the bluegrass fiddling and that style of playing. I met a fiddle player about 10 years ago. Now, I had heard bluegrass and I had been aware of, you know, all the old greats. But then I met a guy called Ross Holmes, who was he was touring with Mumford and Sons back at the peak of their heyday, when their F-bomb got them to number one. That was always the joke. Little Lineman, the F-bomb got them to number one. Anyway, but he was in Galway and we met and we started playing, and he then showed me these bluegrass techniques that I'd never heard, and which actually blew my mind open. And then I started to see how they would work in the traditional Irish music, and then you actually see how closely linked those two types of music are. You know, the Western swing and the bluegrass and Irish music all have very tight roots, and you can trace a lot of that back to there's Irish influence in all of that music, you know. So putting them together then and having, I suppose, such a grounding in Irish traditional music to add those flavors of bluegrass into it kind of does give it this new, it's not new, I'm not the first person to have done it, but it's certainly it is innovative in its own way. And then I also throw some nice effects pedals and, you know, some different stuff. As a fella said to me at Bluegrass last day, I like your fiddle, I don't like your electronics. And I was like, okay. That's fine.
Now some of those hobbies that you have, I wonder, is it well, at least let me rephrase that. The hobbies that you have, if I did those, I might not have my fingers because I'm very not great at cutting things with whether it's cooking or not. I'm getting better. My hands aren't as cut up as they used to be. But you enjoy, making stuff out of timber, cooking. I feel like that's dangerous for the fingers that you might need to play the fiddle.
No, I've had a few. I've had a few close calls. Thankfully, not too much with the woodwork. I'm always very, very careful. I've had a few close calls with my chopping my nice knife. I did take the top off this finger about a month into lockdown back in 2020, when I actually just sliced it clean off and then I super glued it back on. It was fine.
It's all good. It's all good. I just don't feel anything there anymore, or you know when the weather's going to change, right?
Yeah. That's actually, it came back together fine. No, I hear you, and lots of people say that, but I choose that time to be conscious and in the moment and minding my surroundings.
Well, and I'm guessing that's though a good way to kind of pull yourself out of the music, and you guys do a lot of touring, you play a lot of shows. I'm sure that's perfect downtime and kind of something completely different, so to speak, as well.
Yeah, I've always had a love for doing things with my hands, and I actually just making stuff, and even on tour, like I knit as well when I'm on tour. Again, it's just something to be doing. I tie-dye, hotel room tie-dye. These sorts of crafty things that, especially when I'm away from home, because at home I'm always tinkering with something. I'm always, fixing something or making something. But out here, when you've just got your suitcase and it's kind of limited to what you can have for that sort of tactile, creative. Obviously, the music is great, but just that other part of me that. So, I really do enjoy. I especially enjoy carpentry. Like, I'm not particularly good. I'm able to, like, I built some sheds and built a cabin and done things like that, but it wouldn't be what you would call fine woodwork. Not making cabinet doors, like.
but you're able to do it skillfully and use those hands, and again, that's an art, different art form, And I read too where I think you've had a love for the stage. I think you were on the stage at age 5. I mean, again, it just seems like you might have been destined for something like this.
Yeah, I think I've always known I wanted to play music full time, or at least to work in music full time. The way it happened, I turned out to be gigging primarily up to now, but yeah, I wound up on stage at the age of 5 in a show that was run by our music teacher, and it was kind of it was run for the tourist season in Galway, and it was little kids on stage. I mean, I was 5 and I was playing the bodhrán, and what's cuter than a 5-year-old playing a little drum on stage,
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to my daughter and her recital, this winter, her little Christmas play. So yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, so I guess then you said even then, I mean, maybe not then at age 5 did you think you were going to do this professionally, but when did it kind of set in at an age where you were like, you know what, I just love this. This is what I'd rather do than anything else.
For as long as I can remember, like it really. It was always, my life was always intertwined with music, like all the way through. It was the most important thing, all the way through my childhood, all the way through my teens. I was very lucky with the high school, the secondary school we call it, the high school I went to in Ireland. We had an amazing music program there, an amazing music teacher who, I mean, opened our eyes to the possibility and the idea of collaboration and the idea of being able to make music with anybody that you meet, regardless of their background in music. That you can find a common ground, which we have done. Over the years, I've played with every sort of band. I've been in a bluegrass Elvis cover band at one stage. I've done a collaboration. I was in South Africa a number of years ago and did a whole collaboration with traditional gumboot dancers, and so there's all of this common ground. But the lessons that we were taught through music in school was that it was it was about collaboration. It was about community. It was about meeting people and being able to share music, and that was the most important part, you know. And I think so. I never really had any doubt that I was going to be a full-time musician, you know. So maybe that was where I got my recognition as well as a kid. You know what I mean? I was as a 4 or 5 year old, I was a good musician, as in on the Bowron especially. Like I won an under 12 competition when I was 6. So at that age, I was getting this adulation is the wrong word, but it kind of is, you know, as a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
People going, oh, you're deadly at this. You're really, really good. So it became that focus of validation. So maybe there's obviously some of that involved in my attraction towards it, but yeah.
Well, but you kept up with it too, because you can be good at it at that age, but you still got to keep going. And
well, that's true. Yeah, yeah, and I give a lot of the credit for that to, you know, well, my parents obviously worked hard in getting me through all of it, but my music teacher in school, Mairead Burrell, who I'm still very good friends with and I see regularly, you know, so it's that was a fantastic springboard for it.
Well, and now you're playing with your brother. Is it Inda? Is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's it like playing with him? I mean, is there ever a little squabble there, or
do you have an older brother?
I do, about 9 years older.
Oh, there you know all about it then.
Next
question.
Mine wasn't as bad. Now, if you ask my wife that question, there were 4 of them in like a 5-year period. She totally understands that. But I guess then the next question comes in: when did you decide to play with your brother? Like, was that something you guys ever did growing up?
That kind of. Oh yeah, we like, he would have been in the same show as me. Like, we've played together for years in different things, and like he recorded. He's 6 years older than me, so he recorded his first album when I was still in high school, and I played guitar on that album. And so yeah, we've played together for years. And well, you mentioned about the name of the band, We Banjo 3, because it's called We Banjo 3 because I wasn't in it at the start. There were the 3 other guys, so that's Enda, David and Martin, and they were playing 3 banjos. And at the very start, they entered a competition for a bursary from the Irish government, which they won. It was a 3-year bursary and a covered album recording and touring and all of this sort of thing. And I guested on the first album, and after that album recording, we kind of knew it made sense to have the 4-piece, and the fiddle tied it all together. So then 10 years ago this weekend, believe it or not, we did our first show in the States, and that was at Milwaukee Irish Fest 10 years ago. So, and then it just clicked, and it made sense then for it to be the 4-piece, you know. Working with family is always working with family, though, you know.
I was gonna say, did you ever request a name change? We Banjo 3 and 1 fiddler.
But you know, when I joined initially, some people took it upon themselves to put a +1, you know, beside our logo, and they're advertising gigs, and you're like, no, it's still We Banjo 3. It just makes more fun. It makes it more interesting, you know. No, it is, you know, a name is a name. It doesn't really matter, you know.
Well, and it gives a good conversation for when you got to do things like this and talk to folks like me.
Never get tired of explaining where the name came from.
Well, and I'll get to, you know, kind of a few other things, but you mentioned the Milwaukee Irish Festival, and now when this drops, the festival you'll have performed there. But how big was it to play at that first time? Because I feel like that probably set you guys on the course that you are. Yeah,
the first year we came out here as the band, I had played Milwaukee in 2004 with a different band when I was in my early 20s. So I kind of had an idea in my head of what it was, but when I came back out, it was way bigger than I could have remembered. And when we came out here 10 years ago for the first time, we played 7 shows in 4 days. We were worked very hard. But we asked for it. We said we'll do as many shows as possible, you know. It started out, I remember our very first show, and it was quiet. There were only a few people there, And by the Sunday afternoon, we were in this tiny little tent down the bottom corner of the site called I think it was the Village Pub stage or something like that. Anyway, the capacity of the tent was maybe 100. There was maybe 100 seats in the tent. And as it happened, just as our gig started, there was a huge rainstorm outside. So it started pouring down rain, and thousands of people were just trying to cram into every tent possible. So our tent became rammed with people. It was just like, and the storm was so bad, there was water running through the crowd and under the stage, and but that wound up then to be this really exciting. There was a real buzz in the tent, and then of course, because it was so crowded, we were standing up on tables, and it was just all this. It just got this really sort of crazy energy, and that gig now is, people talk about that. Were you at that one? Do you know? It's like, I was there that year in the tent of the storm, but that year was, it really kicked us off on the road that we're on now, and we have the people of Milwaukee, both the bookers and the crowd, to thank for that, because they really took us under their wing and kind of owned us almost. It's like this thing of, they're our banjo boys. You'll hear them refer to us as that. That's a nice thing. It's those are the fans, the music fans, that keep you on the road.
Well, and you're back there again this weekend, or like I said, it'll have passed by the time. I mean, it'll be last weekend, but I mean, I'm guessing you're not in that tiny stage or that tiny tent anymore when you go there.
No. So now we play. Now we will be headlining the Coors Light stage, which is a stage that's probably, I'm going to guess, somewhere in the region of 8,000 to 10,000 capacity in that stage, and the stage will be, the crowd will be full for that, or it has been in the past anyway. The last time we did it was obviously 2019, and those stages were absolutely jam-packed. So we do have a really nice following, and we played a show in the Riverside Theatre here in Milwaukee back in March, and that was almost sold out, I think, which was, it's a big room, and it feels good to have that support in the town. And yeah, we love coming to the festival here. It's always great fun.
Well, and like you mentioned, you guys have gotten bigger as time has gone on, but you still do those, the kind of the Irish American festival circuit, to a degree. Why is that? Because I mean, I think that's pretty cool. Because like you said, that's kind of how it all started, and it's probably pretty cool to give back in a little bit of a sense.
Yeah, I suppose they're big festivals as well. Like Milwaukee Irish Fest has, over the course of the weekend, there could be maybe 120, 150,000 people come through that festival over the weekend. So while there's a lot of the people there have seen us before, then there's always people that haven't seen us before, and really we enjoy it. We love the festival, and as part of the festival, there's a summer school that runs. So I'm actually teaching, or I teach for 3 days running into the festival. So that's really nice. You get into a room and you get to spend a couple hours talking about fiddle and techniques and styles and all sorts of things, or me telling stories about being on the road or whatever it is, but we really do enjoy that, because the people in the community are really the most important part of the touring life for me, because there's a lot of time that you're in hotel rooms on your own. So when you can be out and meet people, and festivals are great for that.
Well, and you mentioned being able to meet people, share things. You guys do a good job on social media of kind of sharing I wouldn't call it the silly side, but you have fun. You do some video, all sorts of things. What's it like, with social media these days, and being able to share a side of yourselves that you might not? I mean, I'm sure there's give and take, obviously, but
there's give and take. Maybe as I'm getting older, I'm just getting more fed up with social media. But yeah, I know it's a very easy access to share your personality, as long as it doesn't get too contrived. I'm not a big fan of the, right, now we have these are our reels that we have to make because Instagram said so, and I just kind of groan internally and sometimes externally when those things happen. But then you do have opportunity for, as you say, doing silly things and making fun videos, and don't get me wrong, like I did I've done a number of different social media campaigns myself over the years, where for 2 years I uploaded a different tune every day to the social media, and got a big following from that, whatever that means. I'm not sure what it means anymore. There's a lot of numbers on my Facebook page. Doesn't mean anything, but no, I've made a lot of friends through that, both in musician friends, and then every festival I go to, or every gig I go to, without fail, someone will come up and say, I enjoy watching your tunes, and I've learned tunes from the videos that you put up. So, there's obviously benefits to it, and I do enjoy that side of it. And whenever I get a chance, if I meet somebody new or meet somebody that I enjoy playing with, I'll still, record a video and stick it up online or whatever, So.
Well, and like you said, you guys have some fun too. I really enjoyed when you were promoting the album, which came out. And we'll talk about that here in a second. You guys had a little bit of trouble, kind of, doing the. I love the outtakes. I mean, was that just all kind of like as it went? Was that like real time almost of just
that was just that was also the end of a long day. When you've done a long day, because we had a couple of different live things to shoot, and I think we may have had a photo shoot that morning, and we were doing a show in Nashville, and Nashville is always one of those gigs where you're having guests, so it was just a busy day. So by the time we sat down in the 4 chairs, everyone was just kind of like, right, let's get this done. And as soon as you say, let's get this done quickly now in 5 minutes, that's when it all goes wrong. So all those laughs were genuine laughs, and all the bloopers were genuine bloopers. I think you can tell that from looking at it, though. We were genuinely, and the guy who shot all that stuff for us is a guy called Craig from Nashville, and he's a great guy. So he was lots of fun. So that always helps as well.
So I mean, do the two sets of brothers always tend to have a little bit of fun, little picking on each other, little cracking jokes, having a good time?
Bits and pieces, yes and no. We do. It's an Irish thing as well. There's kind of the Irish way of showing love. Sometimes is just insult you, or to we call it slagging. So it's like pulling the piss, kind of. Yes, there's a bit of it, and of course we're sarcastic bunch, the Irish. And who doesn't like a good bit of sarcasm as defense or deflection,
I like it. I'm sure you guys never use that either while you're out traveling, just to liven things up.
No, never. No.
I figure you're all good, well-behaved gentlemen. So.
Yes, of course.
Now, as we get back into the music, and we'll talk about the Open the Road, the new album, you guys kind of have a blend of that Irish music, and you talk a little bit about it too. You picked up some bluegrass and some other things, traditions with what you do. And I feel like that comes through the whole set of music. To me, it's like nothing I've really ever heard. I mean, do you get that a lot, or is it just kind of just how the sound came to be?
It's just how the sound came to be, and we didn't set out with a plan to sound a certain way. You know what I mean? It did happen through gigging. We're not very good at rehearsing as a band. I'm terrible at rehearsing on my own. Like, if I have to learn something for a gig, I'll learn it, but then I'll actually perfect it while on stage, or sort of get it. And as the band, we're the same. We found that our most creative stuff came out kind of on stage, live, where something would happen and we were like, oh, that was cool. Maybe we'll remember, and you'll do it again the next night, and then it becomes part of the set. So a lot of the tracks that we have sort of developed over the years have developed that way, and often the stuff that if we're in studio and we're short a track and we write a track, or we do it without having gigged it, like 6 weeks after we go out on the road, it's a totally different song, and we're like, damn it, can we go back and record it now? And actually that did happen with this last album, where we were in studio and what turned out to be the title track of the album, we didn't realize it was going to be the title of the album when we recorded it. The Open the Road tune, which is a tune that I composed. We recorded it in studio, and we did the few, I don't know how many takes we did, and for that tune, because it's an instrumental piece and the tempo undulates, and it's not to a click track. So we were just all live in one room, which meant that there wasn't any room for editing out mistakes or any sort of tweaking, or very little room for that. So we got a take that we were happy with, and then we went on tour. And 3 weeks into tour, I woke up one morning and I was like, we have to re-record Open the Road. So I kind of wrote the message and I sat with it. I was like, oh, is everyone going to hate this idea? So I sent the message and I said, I really think we need to re-record Open the Road. And I got the green light. I found a studio. We had 2 nights in Ann Arbor, and I rang a friend of mine who's in Ann Arbor, and he was away, so we could. Anyway, we got a studio. We went in and we re-recorded it at like 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and that's what's on the album. And so we had allowed it to develop over a number of weeks, and then we re-recorded it. So, yeah.
Well, and how is it blending? Because most folks that I ever talk to on the podcast, it's all lyrical based songs, or obviously the instrument plays a big part. But for you guys, you do have kind of those jam session type tunes where it's just all of you getting to play, and it's that traditional kind of Irish music that you would hear. And so, how do you blend that, and how does that work from a creative standpoint, going from songs with lyrics to kind of like you mentioned, like something like Open the Road, or the I believe it was the First Gentleman, or that you also have on the album. So I mean, like, how does those play?
Well, it's funny, for our live show we do usually a 50-50 mix of instrumental and vocal songs, instrumental tunes and vocal songs, and it's just the way we've always done it, because instrumental music is such a huge part of Irish music, much more so than, let's say, the bluegrass world. If you're at a bluegrass gig, you're going to get probably 6 or 7 songs for every one tune, one instrumental tune, whereas we would be at an Irish session, it would be the opposite. You might have 1 song for every 7 tunes, so we find it works very well, and it also gives a nice balance and a mix, and it's a break as well, from if it's all a lot of lyrics. The tunes are also an opportunity for people to dance, and we do encourage people to dance at the shows, and they do. So
Well, I was gonna say the music's definitely one that you get up and have a good time with. The new album, Open the Road, you guys released this summer. I love Gift of Life, Alive with You, and Rialto. How did the album come together? What was it like putting it together?
Well, because of lockdown, it was a different experience, because 2 of us were in the US and 2 of us were in Ireland, and so David is the main songwriter, and he produced this album as well. So he had been working away writing songs while he was living in Nashville at the time, and he was writing with different people there. So that song Alive in You was co-written with a guy called Stevie Reese, fairly sure. Yeah, I think that was Stevie, and he's a great musician based in Nashville. So Dave was constantly sending us files to a Dropbox folder, and then he would follow up with a call. Did you listen to that? And I'd be like, I forgot. And then he would send it again, and I would say, yes, I listened to that. And he said, did you learn it? And I'm like, no, I'll go and learn it now. Yeah. So he worked very hard on this album. So by the time we got to studio, he had Dave had a lot of demos worked up for the stuff, and he had a good idea in his head of where he wanted it to go production wise. So we just which was a very different approach to other albums, where other albums it was more democratic, where we were all producing in equal roles, which sometimes is difficult because you can have two very different creative directions on the same piece of music, and then it just gets muddied. And so just saying, Dave, you're producing this, and tell us what to do. You know, what you're hearing and what your vision for it is. And he did an excellent job, and it, I think it made for a fairly cohesive album, and then a good working environment, and it also made it quite quick to record. Like in studio, we were 7 days in studio together only. Now there was bits and pieces of remote recording and that other session that I mentioned, but you know, that's pretty quick turnaround for an album. And yeah, I think it worked out well. And like that Gift of Life song has the drummer Steve Ferroni drumming on it, who was Tom Petty's drummer for a long time. So that was a connection that was made between us and him during the end of my brother actually was in touch with him somehow during lockdown, and he drummed on a Tom Petty cover that we did during the time when everyone lived on Zoom.
Yes, yeah. Well, it almost sounds like in a way, you know, I've had others say this. Obviously, yes, it can, you know, take the wind out of the sails for a lot of folks, because you know, they're planning on big years in 2020 and things like that to take them to the next level. But it also gave folks a chance to meet some people, get right when they didn't always have a chance because they were always on tour. I mean, so it sounds like it gave you guys a different way to do it, and that's how it's almost in a way different than the first few albums that you guys put out.
Definitely. And I know what you're saying. Like, an awful lot of people had a tough time in 2020, and I personally had a very nice time in 2020 because I was home. I hadn't been home for that long in one go for 20 years or more. We were about 6 or 7 weeks into being at home, and my wife turned to me and said, "You realize this is the longest time we've ever been in each other's company without one of us being on tour."
and you guys were okay with it, right?
We're better friends now than we were at the start of it. Yeah, by a long way. So that's, yeah, definitely a positive. And yes, from a creative point, I think it took a while for me to allow the creative to, certainly the music to come out, because there was a lot of energy put into the online stuff, you know, editing videos and trying to record remotely, and there was a lot of invented pressure to be present online. Mm-hmm. You know, and I say invented pressures, then we were placing the pressure upon ourselves. There was nobody external saying you have to do this, but we kind of felt that we had to. But then, yeah, I did then write a good few tunes and a few different projects, and yeah, it was a good creative thing, I think. Yeah.
Well, and like I said, I love the album. You know, Gift of Life with the lyrics might be one of the best songs I've heard in a long time, and you know, it's got to be cool too to be able to now share those out and be able to play in front of folks again, and because I mean, to me, like you said, it's a community. It's especially with Irish music, or you know, things like that. People like to get up, have a good time, whether it's a drink or not. They're out there dancing, and there's lots of smiles.
That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. We've just been doing festival after festival this summer, and it's always lovely, and you kind of forget it, especially being at home for a couple of years, to sit down. Like, we did a festival in Dublin, Ohio, just outside Columbus there a couple of weeks ago, and I sat down at a session in the hotel, and there were maybe, you know, 20-25 musicians, and we all played tunes. They were from all over America. There were some people from Canada. There was some people from further afield as well, and we all played tunes that we knew in common, without sheet music, without anybody telling us what to do. And it, when you're in that group of communal music, there is a pulse to it that kind of, you feel this energy when it's it kind of just feels like that, and it does your heart good. It really does. There's a it's a real that's a real sound bath where you're you're in the middle of all of that, and yeah, I really love that. It's
Well,
one of my favorite things.
it goes back to kind of what you said, what your music teacher said. Music's at the core of everything. It's something
Yeah.
that can cross generations, cross borders, everything like that. And
Yeah.
as we wrap up, webanjo3.com. You find them on social media as well. And I guess my last question is, what can folks expect the rest of 2022 from y'all?
2022, we're finishing out this summer tour. We go and we do Minnesota State Fair, which is always fun, and then we finish up this leg of the tour at Kansas City Irish Fest. Again, another great festival. We have some dates in the fall that are not on the top of my head, but they're on the website, I'm sure. And yeah, just happy to have the album out there. Happy that you enjoy it, and lots of people seem to be enjoying it. And it's just good to be back out playing music.
Well, Fergal, I really appreciate this. Thank you for sticking with me through the lovely technical issues. And lo and behold, I think this recorded perfectly. So I appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much.